I stood there. Terminal 2, San Diego International Airport, December 24th, Christmas Eve. The crowd around me was glowing laughter hugs, parents being tackled by grandkids in ugly sweaters. And me, I was alone, holding 5 carefully wrapped gift bags, and 1 suitcase full of everything I had left to give. My daughter said, "Wait at the exit, Dad, I'll be right there." That was 13 hours ago. I called 35 times, no answer, no reply, not even a text. At first, I told myself it was traffic. Then, maybe something happened to her, an emergency. But deep down, I knew something worse had happened. She forgot me. That day, I wasn't just left at the airport, I was erased. Like I was an old photo she no longer wanted on the mantle. I watched families reunite. A little boy ran into his grandfather's arms. A husband kissed his wife under blinking mistletoe, and I just waited, with gifts meant to say, "I still love you. I still matter." But something changed around hour 10. Something snapped. She thought I'd wait forever. She was wrong. This is the story of how I took everything back. Jack Whitmore wasn't the kind of man who posted on social media. He didn't write status updates, didn't take selfies in his workshop, and never imagined he'd be the main character in a story like this. He was an ordinary man, but he lived an extraordinary kind of quiet. At 29, Jack opened a small auto repair shop just outside Bakersfield, California. 1 rusty garage, 1 dented toolbox, and 2 calloused hands. Most people didn't think he'd last 3 months. But 30 years later, Whitmore Auto Service had 6 locations across Kern County. Not because of luck, but because he showed up every day, without complaint. People didn't just remember Jack for fixing cars. They remembered how every Christmas he gave free oil changes to single mothers, how he knew his customers by name, how he brought gingerbread cookies, his wife's recipe, every Friday. But everything changed when Margaret, his partner in life and in cookies, passed away from cancer. Jack was 54. From that moment on, his life revolved around one thing only, his daughter Natalie. He stopped buying things for himself. Every extra dollar went to her education, her car, her first apartment. He believed deeply that if he gave her everything, she'd never turn her back on him. But beliefs are fragile, and Jack was about to watch his faith in family shatter into silence. After Margaret passed, the world went quiet for Jack. The house was too big, the coffee too bitter, the silence too loud. But Natalie was still there. And Jack poured everything he had left into being the best father he could. He packed her lunch every morning until senior year, waited outside school plays with a coat in one hand and hot cocoa in the other. When she left for UCLA, he cried the entire drive back, but didn't let her see. Instead, he said, "Go chase the world. I'll be right here." And he was. 4 years of tuition, study abroad in Florence, a Honda Civic with a red bow on her birthday. Then came grad school, NYU, East Coast dreams. Jack picked up weekend shifts just to cover the rent on her Manhattan studio. He didn't complain, not once, because to him this wasn't sacrifice. It was love, it was purpose, it was what Margaret would have wanted. When Natalie married Trevor, a business consultant from Orange County, Jack paid for half the wedding. He bought them their first dining table, helped with the down payment on their house. He even gave them his old leather briefcase, the one Margaret had gifted him the day he opened his first shop. It still smelled faintly of motor oil and peppermint. And when little Ellie was born, Jack started saving again. Not for himself, but for her future. Because Jack believed that loving someone meant always showing up. But this Christmas, no one showed up for him. Jack had planned everything weeks in advance. He chose San Diego over snowy Denver because Natalie said California winters were easier with a baby. He wrapped 5 gift bags, each one labeled carefully in his own neat handwriting. A blue and gold scarf from a boutique Margaret once loved for Trevor. A soft pink sweater for Natalie, handpicked to match her eyes. A picture book for Ellie, signed by the author. And tucked deep in his coat pocket 3 envelopes. 2 checks, $50,000 each, and a third one labeled for Ellie. Education fund with $75,000 inside. Jack called it his Christmas of gratitude, not because he needed to be thanked, but because it made him feel full to give without being asked. His flight landed at 1:45 p.m. Christmas Eve, right on time. He stepped off the plane, gift bags in both hands, wearing his old wool coat and a hopeful smile. He paused beneath the arrival sign, watching family after family reunite in waves of laughter and hugs. Kids with tinsel in their hair. Grandmothers crying softly into plaid coats. Jack stood still, scanning the crowd for Natalie's face. His phone buzzed. A message from her. Running late, be patient. No emojis, no warmth, just 2 cold words. Jack blinked. It wasn't like her. Not the Natalie he remembered, but maybe Christmas was hectic. Maybe Ellie was fussy. He smiled anyway and stepped outside to wait. The clock read 2:05 p.m. Jack had no idea that the real waiting was just beginning. Jack stepped outside, the cool California breeze brushing against his face. Snow didn't fall here like it used to in Denver, but the air still carried a bite one that crept through the seams of his old wool coat. He stood beneath the passenger pickup sign, a familiar landmark from past visits. Only this time, he was alone. He set his gift bags down carefully, forming a little fortress of color and ribbon at his feet. Families passed by in waves, a dad in a Santa hat. A young couple juggling toddlers in car seats, a grandmother laughing as 2 boys raced toward her with open arms. Jack smiled at their joy, at their warmth. It reminded him why he came. His phone buzzed again. It wasn't Natalie, just a weather alert. Clear skies through midnight. He checked the time, 2:23 p.m. Still early, he told himself. San Diego traffic was always rough. Maybe they had to stop for baby formula. Maybe anything but being forgotten. To pass time, he counted taxis, yellow, white, green. 27 before he lost track. Then he adjusted the scarf around his neck, the same one Natalie gave him years ago when she still called him Daddy. A little girl tugged on her father's sleeve beside him. Is that Santa's helper? The man chuckled and said, Maybe. He looks like he brought something special. Jack grinned. But behind that smile, a strange unease had begun to settle in his chest. The sun dipped behind a haze of palm trees and airport terminals. It was now 3:45 p.m. Jack rubbed his hands together more out of habit than from cold. He looked down at the gift bags. The burgundy one, Natalie's favorite color, sat perfectly still, untouched by time or care. He pulled out his phone again. No new texts, no missed calls. Just the same background wallpaper, a photo of baby Ellie last Christmas sitting on his lap, chubby fingers tugging at his beard. Her laugh had echoed through the house that morning. It still rang in his ears. He called Natalie, straight to voicemail. He called Trevor, no answer. He hesitated, then called again. Once, twice, 3 times. A family sat beside him, briefly chatting about dinner plans. They left just as quickly off to meet their ride. Jack remained. He checked the time again, 4:12 p.m. His legs were starting to ache. His back stiffened from standing in one place too long. Still, he didn't move, because this was Natalie. She wouldn't forget. She couldn't. But then a thought crept in quietly like frost along the edge of a window. What if she's not coming? He shook it off, tried to smile. then picked up one gift bag and adjusted its bow, as if doing so might somehow keep the promise alive. The terminal behind Jack flickered to life as dusk settled in. Yellow light spilled through the glass, casting long, tired shadows across the pavement. It was now 5:17 p.m. 4 hours. 4 hours of waiting, watching strangers reunite, while he stood perfectly still, clutching promises no one came to keep. He sat down on the cold metal bench. His knees cracked slightly as he lowered himself like a worn book spine folding open again. Jack scrolled through old messages. Most were one-word replies from Natalie, thanks. Okay, busy now. Once she'd sent a photo of Ellie's Halloween costume. He stared at it now, zooming in on the crooked smile Natalie had drawn on her daughter's pumpkin. Even that felt distant. The airport speakers overhead clicked on. Flight 628 from Portland now arriving at Gate 9. Jack barely looked up. He had stopped expecting anything from the sky. He opened the smallest envelope, the one labeled Ellie Education Fund. He had planned to slip it under the tree tonight. Maybe even read her a letter with it. Dear Ellie, this isn't just money. It's a door, a future. A reminder your grandpa believes in you. He folded it back slowly, then set it back into his coat pocket. Still waiting, still believing. But now, that belief had started to crack. It was 7:12 p.m. The crowd at the pickup zone had thinned. Fewer hugs now, more silence, the kind that stretches too far to ignore. Jack stood up slowly, brushing off crumbs of frost from his sleeves. The bags were lighter now, not because the gifts were gone, but because the meaning inside them had started to fade. He opened his phone once more, dialed Natalie again. Voicemail. No ring, no apology, no explanation. Just the robotic voice. The person you're trying to reach. He ended the call before it finished. For a moment, Jack looked up at the airport sign glowing in the dark like a false promise. Then he hailed a taxi. The driver was a man in his 50s wearing a red beanie and sipping coffee from a gas station cup. "Rough night, sir?" he asked as Jack climbed in. Jack forced a small smile. "Long one." "Family not show?" the driver asked, casually adjusting his mirror. Jack hesitated. Something like that." As they drove, the streets of San Diego flickered past in holiday lights and palm trees strung with tinsel. And in that passing blur, Jack saw a different version of himself, one from 10 years ago, holding little Natalie on his shoulders, her hands reaching up to place the star on their Christmas tree. That Jack had hope. That Jack believed love was enough. But the man in the taxi, he wasn't sure anymore. The taxi turned into Orange County around 8:20 p.m. Christmas lights blanketed every street corner, some twinkling in patterns, others blinking wildly to the beat of a classic Elvis carol. Every house seemed to shout home, except one. Jack sat forward slightly as they turned into a quiet cul-de-sac. Number 472 Maple Crest Drive, Natalie's home. He'd helped her choose it. Wrote the first check for the down payment. Even helped stain the front porch steps during summer. It was glowing now, every window lit up the yard full of cars. Laughter leaked from inside like steam from a warm kitchen. The taxi slowed to a stop. "This the place?" the driver asked. Jack didn't speak, he just nodded. He paid the fare, stepped out into the crisp night, and stood across the street for a moment. Through the living room window, he saw a tree draped in gold ribbons. Trevor in a cardigan pouring wine. Natalie adjusting Ellie's hair. A fireplace crackled behind them. Someone held up a camera for a group photo. And Jack, he was nowhere in it. His hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from something deeper recognition. They weren't late. They weren't stuck. They simply never planned to pick him up. He crossed the street slowly, his heart beating louder than his steps. And as he reached the front door, the sound of Natalie laughing behind it cut deeper than silence ever could. Jack stood at the door longer than most people would. Not because he didn't know what to do, but because somewhere deep down he was hoping someone would open it before he had to knock. No one did, so he rang the bell. Once, twice. The laughter inside dipped, then rose again. Finally, the door creaked open. Natalie stood there, wineglass in hand, eyes wide with surprise she didn't bother hiding well. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Jack blinked, stunned. "You told me to wait at the airport." Natalie's lips parted, then twisted into something between guilt and irritation. "Wait, I thought your flight was tomorrow night. Didn't you say the 25th? Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. Natalie glanced behind her party, still going Trevor holding Ellie a table full of food and not a single extra chair. "Well, we're kind of in the middle of dinner," she said, stepping halfway outside. "Why didn't you call?" Jack stared at her. Not angrily, just quietly. "I did," he said softly, 35 times. Natalie looked down, then back over her shoulder. No one came to greet him. No one paused the music. She stepped aside just slightly as if deciding whether to let him in or let the moment pass. Jack didn't move, because in that instant he finally understood. He wasn't late. He wasn't forgotten. He just wasn't wanted. Jack stepped into the doorway, but only halfway. Inside the house was glowing. A fire crackled in the hearth. Ellie sat on Trevor's lap holding a candy cane. Natalie's friends from work were gathered around the table, raising their glasses for a toast. There was no pause, no heads turned. No one stood to greet him. He looked around. No chair waiting, no plate set, no stocking with his name on the mantel. Just voices overlapping as if he were a stranger who had accidentally walked into someone else's holiday. Natalie turned back toward him. "We really didn't expect you tonight. I thought I was clear about the date." Jack stayed quiet. He looked to the corner where his gift bags used to sit on their mantel every year. Now, that space was filled with matching pottery and Pinterest-perfect garlands. Things he hadn't helped decorate. Things he wasn't part of. Trevor finally spoke from behind his wineglass. "Look, Jack, maybe now's not the best time. Ellie's overstimulated, the house is full." His voice trailed off not with regret, but with convenience. Jack looked down at the gift bags in his hands, still untouched. Still heavy with thought and love that clearly didn't fit the room anymore. So he nodded. Not in agreement, not in defeat, just finality. "I'll leave these here," he said softly, "and I'll let you get back to whatever this is." Jack turned to leave, but then paused in the narrow entry hallway. He placed the gift bags gently by the coat rack, straightened the one with Ellie's name, then quietly reached for his scarf. The one she gave him when she was 12. It still smelled like pine and engine oil. Just as he stepped toward the door, he heard voices behind the hallway wall, low, unguarded, unaware that he hadn't yet left. Natalie's voice. "God, I told you this would happen." "He never gets the hint." Trevor replied, tone flat. "Why didn't you just tell him not to come?" "Because he's my dad, Trevor. It would have made me look bad." "Well, it's your inheritance on the line. You're playing this long game. Just don't let him think he still matters." Natalie scoffed. "He's a mechanic. He doesn't get it. Once he's, gone, we'll get the lake house and what's left of his savings. Until then, I smile and nod. Silence. Then laughter. Short, sharp, like a match striking dry wood. Jack didn't breathe, didn't blink. His heart didn't just break, it locked shut. Every Christmas morning he stayed up all night assembling dollhouses. Every late payment he made on his own mortgage so she could pay hers on time. Every ounce of love traded for convenience and a countdown. He placed the scarf gently on the coat hook, then walked out the door without a single word. Jack walked down the driveway, his footsteps slower than before, but firmer. The stars were out now, unbothered, as if nothing inside that house had just collapsed. But something inside Jack had. He reached the end of the block and paused beneath a streetlight, opened his coat, pulled out the 3 envelopes, 2 checks, 1 education fund, all handwritten, all with love, all for people who saw him as a wallet waiting to expire. He looked at the envelope labeled Ellie for college, held it in his hands for a long, quiet moment, then tore it straight through the center until the numbers meant nothing. The other 2, he didn't rip them. No, he would use them, but not for Natalie, not for Trevor, and certainly not for a future built on betrayal. He reached into his phone, opened his bank app, and transferred the scheduled $2 $500 monthly support to 0. He had been helping pay part of their mortgage, the insurance on Trevor's Tesla, even the nanny 2 days a week. All gone now. He didn't feel rage, he didn't feel revenge. He felt clarity. For the first time in years, Jack wasn't acting out of guilt or hope. He was acting out of self-respect. And before midnight hit, he checked into the nicest hotel in San Diego, the Pendry downtown, ordered a steak, poured a glass of wine, and whispered to himself, "Merry Christmas, Jack, you finally came home." By dawn, the world outside Natalie's house was still asleep, but Jack was already awake. He sipped black coffee from a porcelain mug at the Pendry rooftop lounge, wrapped in a hotel robe, looking out over the San Diego skyline. There was no bitterness in his face, just calm. Like a man who had finally stopped trying to fix what was never broken, only ungrateful. At 7:42 a.m., he packed up the only thing he had left to return. 1 final envelope, plain white, no cash inside, just words. He drove back to 472 Maple Crest Drive, parked across the street, and walked toward the porch with a steady step. No one was awake. No children squealing over presents. No Christmas music. Only silence. He opened the mailbox full of ads and bills slipped in the envelope and turned away without knocking. Inside the envelope, written in his careful cursive, "Natalie. You taught me something this year. It took me 67 years to learn it, but I did. Love without respect is not love. It's servitude. I forgive you. But I will no longer fund your cruelty. Everything I was saving for you is now mine to enjoy. And I will." Dad, he didn't need to sign a check, didn't need to raise his voice, just walked away. Finally free. It didn't happen all at once. There was no explosion, no courtroom, no dramatic scene. Just a series of small silent losses that crept in the way frost claims a windshield. Mid-January, Natalie noticed her auto payment for the mortgage bounced. She blamed the bank, called Jack's accountant, but no one answered. February, Trevor's Tesla got repossessed. Turns out Jack had been covering insurance premiums, since Trevor's firm quietly cut his salary last fall. Ellie's private daycare bill doubled. The nanny quit when payments came in 2 weeks late. By spring, the cracks widened. Natalie reached out once, a voicemail, stiff, no apology. "Hey, Dad. If you're mad, let's talk. Just remember you're still Ellie's grandfather." Jack listened. Deleted it, no reply. What Natalie didn't know was that Jack had moved. Not just from San Diego, but from everything that ever tied him to silence. He rented a small cottage near Monterey Bay, volunteered at a local high school's auto program, and took walks every evening by the shore. His savings, no longer waiting for inheritance. Now funding cruises, jazz concerts, and weekend road trips to places Margaret once dreamed of. Trevor and Natalie downsized, sold the house, moved into a rental. And every Christmas after that, a small card still arrived for Ellie, but never with money. Only this, from Grandpa Jack: earn the life you want. Never expected. By dawn, the world outside Natalie's house was still asleep, but Jack was already awake. He sipped black coffee from a porcelain mug at the Pendry rooftop lounge, wrapped in a hotel robe, looking out over the San Diego skyline. There was no bitterness in his face, just calm. Like a man who had finally stopped trying to fix what was never broken, only ungrateful. At 7:42 a.m., he packed up the only thing he had left to return. One final envelope, plain white, no cash inside, just words. He drove back to 472 Maple Crest Drive, parked across the street, and walked toward the porch with a steady step. No one was awake. No children squealing over presents. No Christmas music. Only silence. He opened the mailbox full of ads and bills, slipped in the envelope, and turned away without knocking. Inside the envelope, written in his careful cursive, Natalie. You taught me something this year. It took me 67 years to learn it, but I did. Love without respect is not love, it's servitude. I forgive you. But I will no longer fund your cruelty. Everything I was saving for you is now mine to enjoy, and I will. Dad. He didn't need to sign a check, didn't need to raise his voice, just walked away. Finally free. Jack didn't walk away angry. He walked away awake. For years he had mistaken silence for peace-giving, for love, and loyalty for worth. But standing outside that door with 35 ignored calls and a heart full of unmet effort, he finally saw it. Love that demands nothing in return shouldn't be mistaken as love that deserves nothing in return. Jack's lesson wasn't bitter. It was sobering. Like cold water in the face after years of sleepwalking. He realized he'd been funding their comfort at the cost of his own self-worth. Every sacrifice, every check, every patient smile. It wasn't noble anymore. It was enabling. And so he rewrote the narrative. From forgotten father to man who chose himself. From the guy left behind at the airport to someone watching sunsets over Monterey Bay with no one interrupting the quiet. He still thought about Ellie. Still hoped she'd grow up learning that love should be earned, not expected. And sometimes, just sometimes, he'd catch a memory, drifting in her giggles, echoing from Christmas mornings past. It stung, but it also reminded him those moments were real. His love was real, and they just didn't deserve the rest of it. Jack didn't need revenge. He needed release, and he finally gave it to himself. Somewhere tonight, another man like Jack is sitting quietly holding a gift no one will open, waiting at an airport where no one arrives. He won't raise his voice. He won't send angry texts. He'll just wonder, was I not enough? Did they forget me? Or choose to? If this story touched something in you, share it. Because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear that they're not alone. And more importantly, they're not worthless. We live in a world that teaches us to give, to be patient, to wait. But there comes a point when silence becomes self-harm, when love without boundaries becomes a cage, and the bravest thing you can do is walk away without slamming the door. So if you're listening to this and your heart feels heavy like you've been left behind by those you carried, let Jack be your reminder. You are allowed to keep what's yours. You are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to love yourself louder than the silence they left you with. Not all revenge is fire and fury. Sometimes it's the soft sound of your own footsteps walking toward freedom and never turning back. Thank you for watching. This was another chapter of Revenge Stories.